It is the only thing going up. Sad but true. Almost a century later, his jokes still make sense. Inflation is setting records everywhere. I'll begin with some numbers. American inflation is at 8.5%. That's a 40-year high. Canadian inflation is at 6.8%. That's a 31-year high. In Britain, inflation has topped 9%, the highest in 40 years. And here in India, wholesale inflation has reached 15.08%, the highest in 9 years. In other words, this is a global cost of living crisis. All over the world, prices are rising. In many countries, the people have started revolting. In Sri Lanka, in Peru, in Argentina, thousands of people are protesting against the rising prices. And when prices rise, stock markets fall. Now take a look at this table. Nasdaq was down 4.7% on Wednesday. FTSE was down 2.3%. India's Sensex closed 2.6% in the red. Nikkei was down 1.8%. Germany's DAX closed 1.8% down. This was the worst day for US stocks in 2 years. Did inflation cause this tumble? Chances are it did. Inflation basically leaves you with less money in hand. For example, assume that you used to pay $1 for a dozen eggs. $1 for 12 eggs. That was before inflation started to bite. Now you're paying $1.50 for the same number of eggs. So that's half $1 more. Imagine this happening to all your expenditure for fuel, for groceries, for everything. You would be left with less money in your pocket.
In Biden's agenda. The first three things that any normal nation needs and thinks about obsessively are food, water, and energy. That's the standard. In China, for example, every government policy, foreign and domestic, is designed above all to secure adequate reserves of food, water, and energy. And that makes sense. The Build Back Better agenda was the opposite of that. It did not suggest any concern at all about whether Americans might have enough to eat or could afford enough heating fuel to keep from freezing to death over the winter. Biden's agenda was focused on the kind of added extras you get to when you fixed everything else and then still have trillions left over. Build Back Better promised us something called environmental equity, whatever that is. It demanded amnesty for millions of illegal aliens because at the time, the American economy seemed robust enough to share with the entire world. Universal health care for Honduras. Biden called for free solar panels for everybody and taxpayer-funded pre-K for all American parents, and so on and on. Build Back Better was the neoliberal version of flying cars. It was a dreamy Christmas list of luxuries that for a moment in time seemed almost within reach. A lot has changed. Nobody's talking about flying cars anymore. Here's Joe Biden from yesterday.
With regard to food shortage, yes, we did talk about food shortages. And it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well. And because both Russia and Ukraine have been the breadbasket of Europe in terms of wheat, for example. Just give one example.
Food shortages, Biden said, quote, they're going to be real. Once again, in case you missed it, to repeat, food shortages, not in Sudan, in Cincinnati, in Reno, in Spokane, in Norfolk, and of course in our big cities too, where not a single person who was born here has any idea what a food shortage is. Our problem has always been having too much food. Now we won't have enough. We know that because the President of the United States just told us that on camera. So what is this going to mean? How do food shortages affect a country? Well, if you're interested, go online and read about it. All of recorded history will answer your question. A food shortage is not like deciding to skip dessert. It's not a diet. It's not voluntary. A food shortage is different. It's scary. Food shortages topple governments. They turn moderates into revolutionaries. A food shortage is a big deal. You don't want one. But now we're getting one, just a little over a year into Joe Biden's presidency. Think forward. If the traditional calendar holds, we've got 1,032 days left of the Joe Biden administration. And you wonder what things will look like by then. We're already speeding toward dystopia. Not that the White House seems aware of it or to care in any way. Here's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen from this morning, for example, letting you know it's time to stop whining about gas prices because actually, they're not very high.
How high do you think oil prices can get at the pump?
Listen, there's a lot of uncertainty about it. they're not as high in real terms as they were earlier in this century, and they, it's conceivable that they could move higher.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Settle down. And there's a reason for it. As Joe Biden explained, you're paying more for gas because we have slapped sanctions on Russia. And sanctions